Hi everyone, my name is Emily and I'm the Young Adult Librarian at the Rock Island Public Library, and the book I'm going to tell you about today is called Brazen, Rebel Ladies Who Rocked the World. And this is a graphic novel that profiles a lot of different women throughout history, and the art is just really fantastic. I love how beautiful this book is, and I love how much I learned about dozens of women who, some of these people you've heard of and some you haven't. And one of them I would say probably Josephine Baker, you know who that is. If not, she was an entertainer, and she was born in 1906, so this was at a time where being black in America and in the entertainment world, eventually, she performed on Broadway in chorus lines, but she was noticed by somebody booking artists for Paris. And so she ultimately moved to France, where, there were a lot of, at this time, black intellectuals and artists living in France because, it was a lot better than the United States. So she was actually a spy during World War II. And she was just this fascinating figure who, she had 12 kids that she adopted, married 5 times, and she, was somebody who received full French military honors, again, for her work during World War II. She was famous for, fighting for civil rights in the United States after the war. And during the war, the French resistance, one thing they did was she, there would be messages in invisible ink in her sheet music. So, they could search them. The Nazis would search her music and she'd be like, this is ridiculous. And they're like, oh, we have to check. And it's like, well, you can't see it anyway because it's in invisible ink, all the information I'm sharing. So, again, every section ends, each chapter about each person is just a few pages long. And then at the end you'll get this one really cool 2-page spread. Another figure in this book is Wuzaishian, or Zetian, I might be saying it wrong. But she was an empress in China. She lived from 624 to 705, so, further back in history. And she was going to be a concubine to the emperor, but she was very educated, and she was somebody who could train horses, and she spoke various languages. She was encouraged as a girl to read as much as possible, and eventually the emperor made her Mae, which was a charming lady. So this was being a secretary at this time, and because of this, she was very informed about matters of state, official documents, and so she knew, more than most people in court, even in political positions. And ultimately, she eventually was noticed by the emperor's son, and he was married, he became the emperor after his father, but there was a scandal with her being involved with this guy. So what Wu eventually did, basically, she gave birth to Guozong. This was, the new emperor. This was his first son. And basically what this meant, this was kind of a tenuous political position to be in. Ultimately, her daughter was suffocated when she was a baby. And this was thought to be, something that, oh, how did this happen? Well, it's complicated. We're not sure. And what Wu ultimately did, she accused her enemies of doing this. And so, this is the baby of the emperor, and they were hunted down and executed. And then Wu and Guozong were finally married and were able to live openly. And Wu, she was, somebody who was in these decision-making circles, and, she'd spent much of her life by this time studying matters of court. So she was very informed, and ultimately, after her husband died, basically she put her youngest son on the throne. And this was partially because, well, okay, he was an easier person to kind of direct. The thought was, okay, oh yeah, he's in charge. Except finally in 690, he abdicated and left his mom in power. So Wu actually became the empress. And she was the first and only woman with the title of empress regent in the history of China. This was Sheng Xian. And she founded her own dynasty. She was just this incredible figure. And she lived to be 81. You know, obviously sometimes in history, she's made out to be a different sort of figure. You know, people kind of can reduce her to, oh, you know, she had her enemies killed and she had secret police, and yeah, that's true. You know, fearsome, ambitious, ruthless, you know, these are some things that are used to describe her, certain words, but I mean, this is every emperor or empress in history, basically. You know, she was this figure who just, yeah, she changed, you know, the world as we know it. You know, a big part of the world, China. This is, you know, an empire, you know, that's been around for a long time. And I love, at the end of her section, there's just this beautiful page. Look at this beautiful art. Then look at what the lady on the bridge is doing. She's dropping severed heads into the river. It's just, it's this incredible story. And, you know, certainly she's a figure who was maligned a lot because she was a woman, because she did a lot of things that are, you know, celebrated or feared or at least respected in men, or acknowledged that, hey, people in powerful positions do this stuff. It's not great, or, you know, it's scary, like killing off your adversaries, but yeah, these are things that happened. And I'd never heard of her before this book. So some of the people in this book, like Temple Grandin, are still alive. You know, some are like Betty Davis too. I mean, she was born in 1945, but she's still alive. She's, you know, even as an older woman, started writing music again. Then there's Katya Croft. She was a volcanologist who lived from 1942 until 1997. And she and her husband, they were pioneers in the field of, you know, studying volcanoes, trying to understand the hazards and, you know, knowing the signs for when a volcano is going to erupt, which has saved a lot of lives. And, I mean, ultimately what happened is, oh, sorry, she didn't die in 1997. It was 91. I looked at the number wrong. And this is important because this was when there was this, they were filming a volcano in Unzen, Japan. And they were swept away by lava. And I mean, they knew, you know, after 23 years of following volcanoes around the world, she and her husband both knew this was a risk. But yeah, it's just this incredible story, you know, for her and other people who just sort of wanted to do, you know, maybe pursue unusual careers and carved out a place for themselves. Somebody else in this book who you will meet is Hedy Lamarr. And Hedy Lamarr is known for being this famous, beautiful actress. She was also brilliant, and she's also like one of the reasons we have Wi-Fi. Like, if you've never heard of her, if you've never heard the story of Hedy Lamarr developing this technology, I mean, it was something that, like, basically, she patented this during World War II. She was trying to, like, help the Allies. And, I mean, you know, she was somebody who, she promoted war bonds and helped the war effort that way. But she also developed this technology where radar would hop between frequencies. Like, frequency hopping was the technology. And the Navy just kind of classified her blueprints, and until they were declassified, you know, it wasn't widely used. And then suddenly, yeah, I think after the war, yeah, finally, you know, it was applied to radar, and the technology then was used for commercial stuff, including GPS and ultimately Wi-Fi. So it was this thing where, I mean, she wasn't honored until late in her life, but I mean, finally she was recognized as, you know, not just this incredible actress and beautiful woman, she was, you know, an amazing scientist. Frances Glesner Lee is somebody who, she was a crime miniaturist, and I'll show you a couple more of these. This is just prior to the 20th century. I mean, Frances was born in 1878, and I mean, if you've ever seen the John Mulaney bit where he's like talking about crime in the past, where somebody's like, detective, we found, some of the killer's blood on the floor. It's like, gross, mop it up. Like, that was the attitude. Like, the joke is that was real for a very long time. And Frances was somebody who she wasn't allowed to go to medical school because it was the 19th century. And her parents just said, no, just, learn to embroider, just get married, have kids. She did that, but eventually she got divorced. And after her parents and her brother died, she inherited all this money. And she decided, okay, I've got this friend who's a doctor, and basically she made this huge donation to Harvard. So they created a curriculum about forensic science. Like, this hadn't been done before. And, basically the idea was, at this time, if a woman died under unusual circumstances and her husband just said, oh, it's a suicide, she killed herself, that might be it. That might be the end of the story. Nobody necessarily would look into it more unless stuff was real suspicious. But Frances was somebody who said, hey, let's actually look at the crime scenes. Let's have like a methodical way of looking at these things and look in the trash, look at everything. Don't just like step in the blood or wipe it up. Like, we need to examine this stuff and see what it tells us. And to do this, she would make these really, really complicated dioramas, like these tiny miniatures, because this was a thing in the 19th century and beyond, but this was seen as like, oh, that's an acceptable hobby for young ladies, is to create miniatures. Except Frances applied it to crime scenes. So she did, just these incredible, like, she labels on the jars, and she would like knit with needles so she could like have tiny knitted socks and things. And it was incredible. And yeah, she's somebody who, again, I think I'd read about her prior to this book, but it was really interesting to learn more and how she like got into this. What started as a hobby, became her career. Mae Jemison, she was born in 1956. She was an astronaut, and she's still out there, promoting STEM for women, and, she loves sci-fi. Her love of Star Trek is kind of what took her to NASA ultimately, and ultimately, like, she became a guest star on Star Trek after going to space because, this was just something, she wanted to do, and it worked out. And so, I mean, she's a doctor, she teaches classes in environmental studies, and yeah, she's just, I love her page. This is great. The 2 pages about her at the end of the book. I think, yeah, she was one of the last sections in here. And yeah, if you read this graphic novel, you will learn a lot about a lot of different amazing women, and, how they, even if they started out, being doubted or living in a time where women were routinely disrespected and not, allowed to pursue things, they found a way to make their own way. So yeah, check it out. If you like history, if you like graphic novels, you'll learn a lot. And the artist, Penelope Bajot, she's French, and she's written a few other great books. I think we have her biography of Cass Elliot also here at the library. So if you want to read this book, none of our ebook services have it, but you can check it out here at the library as a physical book. And thank you for watching. I will see you again soon.